Hide him in the dryer.
Before dawn, while entire neighborhoods were still dark and quiet, federal tactical teams simultaneously moved across multiple locations, transforming ordinary homes and offices into active targets. There were no sirens and no shouted warnings, only armed formations advancing with precision as doors were breached and suspects were pulled into custody. Just hours earlier, these places had blended perfectly into the background of daily American life, trusted and unnoticed by everyone around them. This was not a single arrest or a routine operation, but the opening strike against a hidden criminal system that had burrowed itself deep inside legitimate businesses, professional titles, and supply chains that appeared clean on paper. Subscribe to Military Power to follow this story step by step, because what surfaced before sunrise may only be the first signal of a much larger and more dangerous conflict still unfolding beneath the surface. Before sunrise, federal tactical teams converged on a cliffside estate in Malibu that had long symbolized wealth, privacy, and social status. Yet, on this morning, it became the focus of a carefully planned arrest operation. Armored vehicles stopped at a distance, agents moved on foot, and weapons were held low but ready as teams advanced in tight formation across the property. The house itself showed no signs of panic, with no lights switching on and no alarms sounding, which only increased the tension as officers positioned themselves at the entry points. Every movement was controlled, timed, and silent, reflecting months of surveillance and preparation aimed at a single target. This was not a reaction to a street crime, but a deliberate strike against a suspected command figure inside a cartel network. The owner of the estate was publicly known as a respected defense attorney, a figure often seen in courtrooms rather than at crime scenes, which made the operation more sensitive and potentially more dangerous. Federal agents treated the location not as a home, but as hostile ground, expecting resistance, escape attempts, or destruction of evidence. Breach teams took their positions while cover units secured the surrounding terrain, watching windows, doors, and roof lines. When the signal came, the entry was swift, controlled, and overwhelming, leaving no space for confusion or delay. Inside, rooms filled with expensive furniture and artwork were cleared one by one, each space secured with methodical discipline. The clash at the center of the operation was not physical violence, but authority versus reputation, where a figure protected by law degrees and courtroom success now faced armed agents enforcing federal power. Officers searched offices, bedrooms, and storage areas, documenting every device, every document, and every hidden compartment. The contrast was stark, as polished floors and designer decor met gloved hands and tactical gear. This environment, once meant to project legitimacy and success, now functioned as a containment zone under government control. Agents understood that the real threat was not visible weapons, but information, hidden infrastructure, and command links. As the search progressed, attention shifted from living spaces to structural anomalies, places that did not match building plans or architectural logic. A temperature change near a wine cellar raised suspicion, prompting a deeper inspection by technical teams. Bottles rested neatly on racks, yet subtle marks suggested recent movement and concealment. With careful pressure applied to a specific panel, a concealed mechanism released, revealing a reinforced entry hidden behind the display. At that moment, the estate's purpose shifted completely, from a residence to an operational hub. Beyond the concealed entry, the atmosphere changed instantly, replacing polished comfort with raw construction and industrial function. Thick concrete walls lined a descending passage, and reinforced supports indicated that the structure was the result of professional engineering rather than improvised digging. Ventilation systems hummed steadily, pushing fresh air into depths far below the surface, confirming long-term use. Lighting fixtures ran in clean lines along the ceiling, providing visibility for movement and work. This was not a temporary escape route, but a permanent underground structure designed for heavy use. As agents advanced, they documented depth, width, and structural materials, noting the scale of investment required to build such a space. The tunnel extended far beyond the house's footprint, suggesting connections to external locations and supply routes. Communication teams relayed the findings in real time, adjusting perimeter security as the significance of the discovery became clear. The operation expanded from an arrest into a major infrastructure seizure. What lay beneath the estate confirmed that this location served as a central command point rather than a personal retreat. Further inside, officers encountered storage areas filled with sealed containers, stacked with precision and labeled for transport rather than personal use. Chemical odors and processing residue marked the space as an active production zone. Equipment designed for large-scale mixing, pressing, and packaging fills adjoining chambers, all of which are maintained in working condition. Finished product and raw materials shared the same environment, indicating a continuous cycle of production and distribution. This underground system functioned as both a factory and a warehouse, isolated from street-level detection. Agents secured the area, cataloging quantities and photographing every piece of equipment for evidence. The scale indicated a regional or national distribution capability, far exceeding local dealing. Power supplies, water lines, and waste management systems supported sustained operations, reinforcing the conclusion that this tunnel had been active for years. Each detail added weight to the case, showing that the drug trade here operated with corporate discipline and industrial efficiency. The war on drugs in this setting did not play out on corners or highways, but beneath luxury homes and legal careers. This first phase of the operation revealed a pattern of control built on secrecy, structure, and protection by social status, leaving agents aware that deeper layers remained hidden beyond the secured chambers. If you believe this kind of hidden power is more dangerous than open street crime, comment your thoughts below and share how you think these networks should be confronted. As teams prepared to move deeper, underground, attention turned toward areas not designed for storage or production, signaling that the next section would expose a far darker purpose within the tunnel system. Deeper inside the tunnel, federal teams slowed their advance. As the space narrowed and the air grew heavier, revealing an area built for confinement rather than movement, where concrete corridors branched into locked rooms that showed clear signs of long-term human presence and control under constant, hidden supervision systems. Agents documented every step, using lights and cameras to record cell doors, floor markings, and improvised bedding, noting food wrappers, clothing, and restraints that suggested people had been held here for weeks or months, far from daylight, courts, or any chance of outside contact during enforced silence, isolation, fear, and control. This section functioned as a tool of discipline within the network, designed to silence witnesses, pressure victims, and break resistance through isolation, where guards did not need constant violence because the environment itself imposed obedience, routine, and submission over extended periods of confinement without visible oversight, escape, relief, mercy, or hope. Metal bars were secured into reinforced concrete, the hinges worn smooth by repeated use, and the locking mechanisms positioned beyond easy reach, indicating planning rather than impulse. At the same time, ventilation pipes fed air just enough to keep captives alive, not comfortable, reinforcing control through calculated survival methods, systems, design, intent, power, dominance, and permanence. Teams moved room by room, clearing each enclosure carefully, checking corners, ceilings, and drains for threats or hidden evidence, treating every door as a potential trap. At the same time, medical units stood ready, understanding that human suffering often leaves unpredictable risks behind in confined, underground, unseen, controlled, guarded, planned, and concealed environments. As the search extended deeper, forensic teams marked areas of biological residue, scratches and stains, patterns that spoke of injury and fear, collected carefully under strict protocol, transforming the site from a hidden prison into a documented crime scene of organized abuse with methodical precision, restraint, clarity, accountability, purpose, and intent. Beyond the detention chambers, investigators uncovered evidence of lethal enforcement, where sections of the tunnel showed burn marks, chemical traces, and altered flooring, indicating repeated attempts to erase human remains and destroy proof, rather than isolated acts of spontaneous brutality executed through planning, process, control, concealment, repetition, discipline, structure, and authority. Drainage channels and sealed containers suggested a system designed to move waste away, preventing detection and preserving operations quickly. At the same time, tools used for cutting and crushing were stored nearby, cleaned, and organized, reflecting routine procedures rather than panic or disorder within an ongoing cycle, managed, controlled, deliberate, and sustained, operating in a well-coordinated manner. Forensic specialists worked alongside tactical units, photographing surfaces, collecting samples, and sealing areas, ensuring that every sign of violence was preserved for court, reinforcing that this was not battlefield chaos, but an industrial approach to killing within criminal logistics systems, networks, processes, planning, discipline, concealment, repetition, scale, intent, control, and permanence. The tunnel continued toward its logistical purpose, extending beneath roads and infrastructure until it aligned with a commercial warehouse zone near the Port of Los Angeles, linking underground crime directly to global trade routes that move goods daily without drawing attention from authorities, inspectors, communities, systems, partners, oversight, scrutiny, or suspicion. The warehouse appeared legitimate on the surface, registered, staffed, and supplied like any other business. Yet, its proximity to shipping terminals made it ideal for moving contraband, blending illegal cargo into legal flows through paperwork, schedules, and routine inspections that masked intent, scale, control, coordination, access, trust, authority, reach, and power. Agents traced the tunnel exit to reinforced flooring within the warehouse, where hidden access points allowed discreet transfer of goods, demonstrating how infrastructure designed for commerce became a shield for trafficking, protected by regular business operations and regulatory assumptions across supply chains, ports, schedules, audits, permits, contracts, systems, routines, and trust. This connection highlighted how the drug war had shifted away from open street confrontations towards silent manipulation of supply chains, where documents, containers, and logistics replaced guns. Success depended on blending in, rather than standing out within legal frameworks, institutions, processes, oversight, trust, compliance, authority, power, access, routine, and acceptance. Port operations played a central role, as volume and speed limited the ability for deep inspection, allowing controlled shipments to pass alongside legitimate goods. At the same time, corrupt coordination and selective attention ensured that specific containers escaped scrutiny at critical moments within busy terminals, schedules, systems, routines, and oversight, ultimately impacting the overall outcome. Investigators noted that the power of this system came from its normal appearance, as nothing about the warehouse or port activity signaled danger, proving that modern trafficking thrives by hiding inside systems people rely on daily for commerce, employment, stability, trust, order, safety, routine, prosperity, access, movement, legitimacy, authority, and scale. Federal teams secured the warehouse zone, locking down access points and coordinating with port authorities to ensure evidence was preserved. Operations halted while analysts mapped connections between shipments, schedules, and tunnel movements across databases, records, manifests, routes, timing, approvals, systems, oversight, controls, authority, accountability, structure, patterns, scale, reach, impact, and exposure. The seizure marked a shift in the operation, expanding from underground spaces into open commercial terrain, showing how enforcement must confront both physical tunnels and administrative systems that enable crime to move freely through legal channels, paperwork, trust, authority, routine, compliance, oversight, institutions, processes, networks, structures, access, scale, coordination, and reach. This phase demonstrated that dismantling such networks requires patience and precision, as each link must be identified and cut without alerting remaining elements, preventing rapid adaptation or escape through parallel routes within logistics, commerce, finance, oversight, trust, authority, systems, processes, routines, structures, access, coordination, scale, reach, influence, power, continuity, concealment. Throughout the operation, agents treated the site not as isolated crime scenes, but as parts of a larger mechanism, understanding that removing one component without addressing others would leave the system intact and resilient, adaptive, hidden, protected, connected, reinforced, maintained, operational, profitable, influential, powerful, entrenched, stable, shielded, persistent, and active and dangerous. The discovery reshaped priorities, shifting focus from individual arrests toward dismantling structures that allowed trafficking to operate unseen, signaling a broader confrontation between federal enforcement and deeply embedded criminal economies across regions, industries, ports, courts, systems, oversight, trust, authority, governance, stability, order, safety, routine, compliance, access, influence, reach, scale, impact. Evidence gathered here would guide future actions, informing warrants, audits, and coordinated raids as agencies prepared to move beyond physical spaces into financial records and institutional relationships that supported concealment, laundering, protection, access, authority, legitimacy, trust, influence, coordination, continuity, control, scale, reach, impact, systems, processes, routines, oversight, accountability, exposure, risk. This moment underscored the evolving nature of gang wars, where violence is organized through infrastructure and policy gaps, demanding responses that match the sophistication of those who exploit modern systems for profit, power, control, influence, concealment, access, legitimacy, trust, authority, continuity, stability, reach, scale, impact, resilience, adaptation, coordination, persistence, threat. As operations continued, command centers coordinated information flow, ensuring that discoveries underground translated into strategic moves above ground, tightening pressure on connected nodes within criminal networks, logistics, finance, legal cover, institutions, oversight, trust, authority, systems, routines, processes, access, influence, power, continuity, scale, reach, impact, exposure, risk, vulnerability, fracture, disruption, collapse. The scale of what was uncovered confirmed that the conflict extended far beyond one location, pointing toward a nationwide campaign to dismantle corruption and trafficking embedded within legitimate frameworks of commerce, law, governance, oversight, trust, authority, systems, processes, routines, institutions, access, influence, power, continuity, stability, order, safety, reach, scale, impact. With the tunnel secured and the warehouse exposed, teams prepared to escalate their efforts, shifting attention toward intercepted communications that promised to reveal the human command structure behind this network, setting the stage for the next phase of the operation focused on coordination, leadership, decisions, control, authority, orders, intent, and responsibility. As investigators pushed beyond physical spaces and seized devices, the operation shifted into a quieter but more decisive phase where intelligence work exposed how orders flowed through the network and how control was enforced without visible violence. Technical teams isolated encrypted phones, laptops, and secure lines, then began extracting fragments of recorded conversations captured over the course of weeks of surveillance. These recordings did not reveal panic or emotion, but relatively calm coordination, demonstrating how the lawyer communicated directly with cartel leaders as if managing a business account. Each call followed a pattern, with updates, approvals, and instructions delivered in measured tones that treated human lives as variables to be adjusted. The power of this intelligence lay not in dramatic threats, but in its clarity, which mapped authority with precision. Analysts reconstructed timelines from the recordings, aligning calls with movements inside the tunnel and activity at the warehouse. Decisions about witnesses were not debated, but rather processed, prioritized for efficiency and risk management. When a name appeared, it triggered a sequence, followed by logistics and confirmation, then silence. This process revealed a chain of command where responsibility moved downward, while accountability remained hidden at the top. Intelligence officers documented each step, ensuring that every instruction could be traced to its origin. This methodical approach transformed scattered data into a clear, organized picture of control. Surveillance also revealed how the lawyer served as a liaison between criminal leadership and operational crews, translating strategy into action. Calls to intermediaries followed instructions from cartel figures, then passed orders to those managing detention and disposal. There was no confusion in these exchanges. Only routine execution suggested a system that had been rehearsed many times before. Agents listening in understood that this structure prevented chaos and maintained discipline. It allowed the network to function without open conflict, relying on fear and procedure instead of constant force. The recordings exposed a system where death decisions were handled like inventory adjustments. As intelligence accumulated, command centers prepared for the next stage, coordinating across agencies to act before evidence could be destroyed. Warrants were drafted based on intercepted communications, financial trails, and physical discoveries underground. Timing became critical, as analysts identified moments when multiple targets would be active. Federal leaders approved a synchronized response, knowing that isolated arrests would leave the system intact. Planning focused on speed, coordination, and overwhelming presence to prevent escape or retaliation. The objective was not a symbolic gesture, but structural collapse. The national operation unfolded in waves, beginning before dawn across several states. Teams moved simultaneously to offices, homes, and meeting points identified through intelligence work. Lawyers who had served as facilitators were detained at their desks or residences, while intermediaries were taken during routine movements. Agents approached officials suspected of corruption with warrants that left no room for negotiation. Each arrest followed a similar pattern: swift control, evidence seizure, and immediate transport. The scale of the operation prevented warning signals from spreading through the network. Multiple agencies participated, each assigned specific roles based on expertise and jurisdiction. Federal investigators handled financial crimes and corruption, while enforcement units focused on detention and transport. Homeland Security teams secured border-related links, and local task forces assisted with perimeter control. Communication flowed through centralized command, updating teams as arrests progressed. This coordination ensured that no part of the network could regroup or hide assets. The operation demonstrated the enforcement agency's capacity to match the complexity of modern criminal systems. Targets included professionals who had maintained appearances of legitimacy for years. Lawyers who once argued cases now faced charges tied to bribery and trafficking support. Intermediaries who moved money or arranged logistics were detained with detailed evidence of their roles. Officials accused of selling access or protection were confronted with records that traced payments and favors, These arrests shattered the illusion that crime operated only at the margins of society. They revealed how authority and trust had been exploited from within. As arrests mounted, investigators seized documents, accounts, and communication devices, expanding the scope of the case. Financial records exposed laundering paths through shell companies and offshore accounts. Scheduling logs showed coordination with port movements and warehouse access. Contact lists mapped relationships across regions, connecting individuals who had never met but shared roles within the system. Each seizure strengthened the case, reinforcing that the network relied on cooperation across professions. The system was not built by one mind, but sustained by many. Public announcements were limited as agencies focused on securing evidence and preventing interference. Inside command centers, analysts updated charts and diagrams, tracking progress and identifying remaining nodes. The pace was relentless as teams moved from one location to the next without pause. Arrest numbers climbed steadily, reflecting the breadth of the network. Each detention removed a layer of protection that had shielded the operation. The effect was cumulative, weakening the entire structure. The conclusion of this phase made one fact clear. This was not the downfall of a single figure, but the exposure of a system that had been quietly captured. Professionals who were meant to uphold the law had instead become tools of trafficking and control. Logistics chains designed for commerce had been turned into channels for crime. Intelligence showed that every part reinforced the others, creating resilience against isolated enforcement. Only coordinated action could disrupt such a network. As the final arrests were secured, attention shifted to analysis and preparation for what was to follow. Investigators knew that dismantling visible structures would provoke responses from remaining elements. Communication intercepts hinted at attempts to adapt and survive. Agencies are prepared to monitor reactions and prevent reorganization. The fight had moved beyond physical raids into sustained pressure across institutions. This phase marked a turning point, setting the stage for examining how deeply the system had penetrated and what consequences would follow in the next chapter of the investigation. What began as a single luxury estate ultimately exposed a structure far larger than any one house or suspect. A quiet mansion on a Malibu hillside led investigators into a hidden tunnel. That tunnel opened the door to a national network that had been operating in silence for years. Each layer revealed another, from polished living spaces to reinforced concrete corridors, from underground confinement areas to supply routes tied into legitimate trade. By the end of the operation, it was clear that this was never about a single location or individual. It was about how power can hide, move, and protect itself without ever firing a shot. This case shows how modern crime no longer depends on street gunfire or open violence to survive. Instead, it resides within paperwork that appears clean, within professional titles that inspire trust, and within systems that ordinary people depend on every day. Permits replace threats. Contracts replace force. Legal status becomes armor. The most dangerous aspect of this kind of criminal network is not chaos, but order, where everything appears normal on the surface while control and exploitation operate quietly beneath. This is a form of warfare that does not announce itself, yet it reshapes communities from the inside out. The tunnel was not just a passage. It was a symbol of how far this system had penetrated underground, both physically and institutionally. It connected wealth to secrecy, legality to crime, and social trust to organized harm. When such structures exist, they do not collapse on their own. They adapt, they learn, they refine their methods. Each exposed operation becomes a lesson for the next one. If these weaknesses remain unaddressed, similar networks will continue to exist, albeit with improved concealment and fewer traces. They will move deeper into trusted spaces and grow more careful in how they blend in. Without sustained pressure, oversight, and accountability, The same patterns will repeat in different cities, under various names, with the same results. What was uncovered here may not be the end of a story, but a warning about how crime evolves when it is allowed to hide behind respectability. Subscribe to Military Power to keep following these hidden battlefields of modern crime, where the conflicts are quiet, the tactics are sophisticated, and the consequences reach far beyond what most people ever see. In your opinion, do operations like this restore order, or do they only expose a deeper system that has still not been fully confronted?